Hi folks, welcome back, thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. As always, it really does make a big difference when you guys do that. So I've just finished mixing the new song. It sounds absolutely huge. I'm really happy with it. So what I'm going to do today is give you a quick walkthrough of the mix, show you a few of the sounds in isolation, talk about a few of the things I've tried, but also a couple of the basic philosophies that I've tried to apply when mixing this song, both of which I've nicked off mix engineer Andrew Scheps. So I'll talk about that at the end. But first and foremost, let's start at the top with the drums here. Now, don't let the lack of plugins up the top here deceive you. The drums are pretty heavily EQ'd and compressed. I just used analog outboard compressors and EQs for it. So they were all taken out of Pro Tools, put through the units and put back in. So this isn't quite as representative of what actually has happened to the drums. But the drums in isolation, sounding big and fat, sound like this. So pretty big and roomy. There's a lot of reverb on that snare. That's 3 reverbs layered up on the snare. But one thing I tried which really made the snare pop out of the mix was I added a slapback delay to it. So just the snare top mic sounds like this. But with the slapback delay, it really makes it jump out of the mix. So it sounds a little weird in isolation, but in the context of the whole drum sound, I think it really works. Another thing I tried with the drum mixing is whenever I record drums or work with a drummer, I don't usually bother recording a mic on the ride cymbal because it's usually so loud that it's a battle to keep it quiet rather than ever need to make it louder. But I asked Emily to put a mic on the ride cymbal for this song because in the clean picking section, I wanted to put a phaser sound on the ride cymbal. And again, it's something that sounds a little bit funky in isolation. That's the Mutron Phaser 2 guitar pedal, which seemed to work really nicely on that ride. It's really bright and had a lot of the feedback dialed in, so it's quite swirly and psychedelic. But in the context of the full drum track, in that clean picking section, it really does work nicely. It's not super loud, but it's just sitting underneath the main drum sound, adding that swirl. So that was just a fun idea and it really seemed to work. I really like how that works in the track. So moving down here to the bass guitar then, I haven't played this to you in isolation yet. You hopefully have seen the video that I made with my friend Josh recording the bass. But the DI track here, which is just a line out from his guitar or his bass amp head, sounds like this. Now, in addition to that, there is a small condenser mic on the tweeter of his bass guitar cabinet. Now, we weren't playing loud in the room at all, but there's something about that tweeter that just really works. Whenever I record with Josh, there's always a mic on that tweeter, and it forms a really big part of the bass track. So the mic on its own sounds like this. So the two slot together really nicely and they do complement each other very well, and both are a very big part of the bass sound. And as you might have seen in that bass video as well, we also recorded a bass DI through a fuzz pedal and the MXR flanger, which in isolation does sound a little bit odd. But when mixed with the close mic and the DI, it works really nicely, and it just adds a little bit of grit to that bass sound, which I really, really like. So the rest of the track is guitar sounds, and I've broken pretty much all of these down for you guys already. We've got the main rhythm guitar track, which is the double-tracked Dan Electro, the Telly through the Analog Man Sunface, and the Williams Audio Big Muff. So that's the main kind of rhythm track that plays throughout the song. And let's see what else we've got going on here. You haven't heard this guitar part yet. These two parts were done using my Gretsch acoustic, but the one with the mini humbucker in. And I've done two parts of this, one panned hard left and the other panned hard right. And I'll explain more about why I've done that later on. But one was done with a big reverb and a tremolo, and the other one was done through the Neutron phaser, but using a slide and an open tuning. So the two kind of play off together quite nicely. So they sound like this. If I mute those two. So that's two guitar parts you haven't heard yet. And this guitar here, which is the main sort of lick that goes on behind the intro, which was done using the Boss VB2 vibrato pedal. So a kind of daft lick, but it just kind of sits behind the main rhythm guitars and just pokes out in the odd little place, which I really like. So, as I said at the start of the video, there's not too many plugins up the top here. There's a fair bit going on the bass here, but other than that, especially on the guitars, there's pretty much nothing going on. But there are a lot of sends going on. Now, the idea I've tried to use here is one of parallel processing. And what that essentially means is running the processed version of your signal alongside the completely unprocessed version of your signal. So at the end of the session here, I've got a few aux tracks set up with various different plugins on them. So I've got the Kramer Helios channel here with some high-end and a bit of sort of bitey mid-range dialed in. I've got the Abbey Road EQ here, which I'm just using for saturation. The drive is cranked all the way up here. The Aphex Exciter, which adds a bit of sort of high mids in and a little bit of crisp high end. I've got the Klanghelm compressor, which I really like, and it's really cheap. It's about 15 quid this. It's an amazing compressor. The Devil Lock compressor, which just smashes everything to pieces. And the SSL compressor on the entire mix minus the drums. Which, the idea behind using compression on the entire mix minus the drums, and also various areas of the mix. So on the guitar track here, this is like a master aux track for the guitars, and there's also this duplicate here, which is the guitar compression with the Fairchild compressor on it. Now, it's not compressing too much. It's just adding about 1 dB of compression over all of the guitars. But the great thing about this, and doing it on the entire mix without the drums and having various different parallel compression processes going off all at once, is it kind of mixes the track for you. When a lead guitar comes in, it turns the rhythm guitars down, and when the lead guitar drops out, it turns them back up. So it kind of automates the track all on its own, and I really like how it does that. And it just kind of makes everything sound fat and even and balanced out. And on the rear bus here, and this is one of the big ideas I nicked off Andrew Scheps, this is the entire mix minus the drums. So you've got a lovely amount of compression, and it's compressing quite a lot here. Sort of 6 dB of compression on the entire mix, but you haven't got the drums there making it pump, and I'm also blending that in underneath the uncompressed mix, so you get the fatness and the energy of the compression, but without the kind of pumping effects and the sort of transient reduction that we typically associate with compression. So that's an idea I've really tried to use here, and I've done it with EQs as well. So instead of adding an EQ to a guitar track and adding some high end in, I've just bussed it to this Kramer Kramer Helios channel here and added some in on top of the completely unprocessed signal. It sounds much more natural doing it that way, and I find it just leads to a more organic sounding mix. So that's one of the ideas I've kind of nicked off Andrew Scheps for doing this mix, but the other is a concept called LCR, and that basically refers to panning. It kind of came from the days when Andrew used to use an old Neve console, and you did have a pan pot, so you could turn, you know, your guitar parts sort of 45 to the left or 45 to the right or whatever, but you had two buttons. You could have your guitars go, or whichever track, going to just the left speaker, just the right speaker, or both. And if you wanted to pan in between the speakers, you had to engage another circuit, which reduced the gain. So the way he used to mix was just do left, centre, right. So your every single part here, if you look at the pan pots here, they are either dead centre or hard left and hard right. There's nothing in between. And I really like that because it adds a huge width to the sound, but it doesn't muddy up the midfield. So you have this huge spread, but everything has its own space and it sounds really wide without sounding congested. So that's just an idea that I kind of nicked off Andrew again, that I wanted to try in this song. It's not appropriate for every mix, but especially for big sort of stadium rock productions, it really does add the width, but without making everything sound muddy and confused. So I'm just going to play the outro of the track here where it's at its most dense, and hopefully you'll hear that everything still has its own space. It sounds wide, but it's not completely congested to the point of not understanding what's going on. So it's big and wide and everything is kind of working, but everything still has its own space and hopefully it doesn't sound too congested. But with that parallel compression going on, everything sounds balanced and even, but because the drums aren't overly compressed in the context of the mix and they're still poking out above everything else, it still has a really good dynamic range, and I'll go on to talk about that a little bit more in the mastering video in 2 episodes time. So I hope that gives you a little overview of what I tried to do here with the parallel compression and processing, mixing LCR and just playing with a few different instrument parts here today. So in the next video I'm going to look at my 5 favourite plugins when it comes to mixing. As I said, I haven't used too many, but there are some key ones I really can't do without. And then we're going to get on to mastering, and then on the 19th of April at 8 PM GMT, the final music video will be released, and there'll be a YouTube premiere thing going on with a live chat. I'm not sure how it all works yet, but I'm going to do my best to sort that all out very soon. So thank you guys. Please do carry on writing in with your questions for #AskPerky. I've started making those videos now and they're a lot of fun to do. So please do carry on hitting me with all your questions, and please do carry on subscribing to this channel as well. I really hope you're liking how this song is sounding as it's going along, and fingers crossed once it's mastered it will sound absolutely colossal. So thank you guys, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.